children's permission to do anything. It's like, it's weird, right? And that's what I'm just say,
You Canadians are pretty laid back, aren't you? I like it. But I get the sense, and I don't know if it's spirit buddies that I can feel that like the Nova Scotians are a bit like stoic. Is that right? Like
We used to live in
harsh. Yes.
Deal with the harsh conditions.
Yeah, so,
Get along with everybody.
yeah.
Cope with it. What's wrong with you? You know? Don't get emotional about too much.
Yeah, I bet because you know it's isolated and harsh sort of weather and stuff. Is that why everyone's friendly? You think, Nick, because they got to help each other out?
We're also very famous for like being good at small talk.
Good
Good small talk.
I noticed that in the supermarket, heaps of people talking to each other. You know, just like over the back of the trolley. Usually about the weather.
It's funny, you go into a supermarket in Belgium and nobody talks to anybody at all. Even the shop assistant doesn't get talked to. They just put their stuff in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nova Scotia is known to be really friendly.
Yeah. It feels friendly.
It's not like this in Ontario.
It's not like this in Jersey.
I'll bet.
And we can have like a half-an-hour conversation about the weather.
Oh, yeah. That's also the English.
I would find that very boring, but yeah.
I think we all do, but we still do it anyway.
Newcomers, it's easy to talk to someone, but it's still hard to become a friend or get close because it is a superficial friendliness.
Sort of friendliness, Similar in Australia, I suppose.
Yeah, Australia's very similar to that.
Yeah.
Everyone's pretty laid back, pretty friendly, but they don't like going
Deep.
very deep.
Yeah. Getting to know a person. Yeah. Good Well, for the last, it'll only be 20 minutes or 30 minutes at the most, I think. I just, depending on how many questions you ask, but I wanted to just talk about, just generally, about the process of going from awareness to awakening. And the reason why I would like to do that is because I don't want you to get the idea that being aware is everything. Being aware is the start of a journey when it comes to your sin. And awareness is important, as you've seen, right? Because without the awareness, you can't really start the journey. You've got to start from somewhere. And I often liken it to, let's say, I'm here, and I need to travel to, say, Montreal. Right? Now, from memory, Montreal is sort of like a fair bit west, but not a lot. Maybe a couple of days' drive, is it?
12 hours. Yes.
12 hours? Good. So a couple of days relaxed drive. So if you're here and you've got to get there, there's a number of things you're going to have to organise for yourself, isn't it? There's going to have to be some mode of transport. There's going to have to be some way you're going to have to find the directions to get there. You're going to have to know why you're going there. What's the point of going there? Do you really need to go there? Is also part of your consideration of going, isn't it? When you're making a trip of that kind of length. And so it's really much the same when it comes to your sin in relationship to your relationship with God. You've got to understand to a degree what's the point of looking at my sin? Do I really need to look at it? Now, I think we've seen over the last few days that your sin can take a lot of sincerity. So you can see that if you're going to have a sincere relationship with God, then obviously your sin is going to be the thing that stops that. So it's very important to understand that sin is something that we're going to have to deal with. It's going to have to be a direction we take to deal with that. If we want a relationship with God, sin is going to be something we're going to have to deal with. But also consider that if you don't want a relationship with God, sin is still going to be something you're going to have to consider. Right? So sin is the kind of thing that you really haven't got much choice in dealing with it at some point. And this is the thing that most people forget about their sin. They sort of think that, you know, on earth to a degree, when you do something wrong, people are very tolerant about letting you get away with it, aren't they? You know, there are certain things, as long as it's not too bad, you'll probably get away with it. And unfortunately, even with some things that are very bad, like pedophilia or something, a lot of times people get away with it, right? So people on earth are so used to getting away with things. And for that reason, when it comes to sin, most people are going, why do I have to bother about it? Now, I think over the last day and a half already we've shown you, you're going to have to bother about it at some point. Now, many people sort of ignore dealing with it on earth at all. And what they do instead is they just wait for their spirit life to come along and hope they won't have to deal with it there. So there's these philosophies on earth that say, oh, surely God's not that exacting. You know, we're all just human. You know, we're all going to make mistakes. Surely God doesn't, you know, get too harsh on us about that. Well, look at it. If we look at it truthfully, didn't God create us as humans to be imperfect? You know, there's all these sort of explanations given as to why God should let us get away with our sin, right? And if you look at many of the religious constructs on earth, the Christian religious faith is basically saying you can sin, and as long as you believe in the blood of Jesus as a sacrifice for your sins, then you'll be saved from your sins. So in other words, someone else is going to have to pay the penalty of your sin, is the general idea. And then if you look at the Muslim way of life, certain things are not considered to be sins at all that are actually sins. And so this helps you get away with the idea that you're ever going to have to do something about those. And then you look at sort of other ways of life, like the Buddhist way of life, is really you are your own God and you're allowed to determine your own laws, and as long as you're all calm and stoic and tuned from all of your emotions, eventually you'll reach nirvana. Isn't that fantastic? So you don't really have to deal with sin in that path either. And then in the Hindu way of life, it's very similar. It's like, well, your sins get paid for while you're on earth by the life you live. In other words, if I lived a bad life last time, then this time I'm going to be punished for it while I'm on earth. So by the time I hit the spirit world, I'll have paid for them anyway. You know, just because of what they call karma being worked out on earth, you know. So all these religious philosophies are all spiritual beliefs which is basically saying to you, you don't have to deal with your own sin. Right? Nothing could be further from the truth. Right? Nothing could be further from the truth. The atheist philosophy is there is no God anyway, therefore there is no laws, and so therefore you just make your way in the world. It's just another way of saying you're not going to have to deal with your sin. The agnostic way of life, we don't know what to believe, so just be a good person as you define it to be. Another way of going to God, eventually if there is a God, we just say to God, well, I didn't know you existed and I didn't know you had laws, so why don't you let me get away with all that? Right? Just another way of getting away with things. And a lot of religious constructs on earth have been created specifically to help you avoid the confrontation that you're going to have with sin. Right? So, the point of awareness is the very first point that you're going to have to arrive at from a place of denial. So denial says, I won't have to deal with any of it. If there is even such a thing as sin. If there is, I still won't have to deal with it. Or, if there is such a thing as sin, I don't commit them. Because I'm better than that, right? I'm a good person. You know? And there's so much denial in almost everything we tell ourselves that it's very hard even to get from a denial to the state of awareness, to become aware. Now, to become aware, as we've said, requires firstly that truth is presented to you and it is the actual truth universally. Not your ideas or concept of what is truth, but it is the truth of how the universe works. That has to be presented to us somehow. in order for awareness of something to develop, it has to be truthful in order to be aware. There's not much point in being aware of something that's untruthful, because it doesn't help you at all. It needs to be truthful. Does sin matter? Well, the truth to that question is yes, it does. It's going to affect your life here on earth and in the spirit world. And in fact, most people don't feel the penalty of their sins until they pass. So unfortunately for most people, the worst time of their life isn't their life on earth. Right? And that's a sobering thought, considering how bad life on earth can sometimes be. Right? But for most people who pass, their life on earth isn't the worst time of their life. The worst time of their life is after they pass. That first years after they pass, coming to see that, there was all this sin committed and now I am going to have to deal with it somehow. And many people in that state go through this frustration, which is, why didn't somebody tell me? Right? On earth, why didn't somebody say to me then that that was a sin? And I would have, if I had known, I might have stopped it then. And then I wouldn't be paying for it now. Right? And there is so much spirit frustration about the fact that they weren't presented with the truth on earth. And many of you will find, if you don't listen to divine truth or practice it in your life now, you'll find the same frustration when you pass. You'll go, oh gee, I wished I listened to that silly guy saying he was Jesus, so talking about sin at least, right? You're at least going to go that far with it because you'll realise it is a reality of your future existence. Moral laws govern your soul and how it integrates with the universe around you. And those laws are fixed, immovable, and when you break them, there are penalties for it. And that is an undeniable truth that if you deny it on earth, you will come to see it in the spirit world. Right? Now, the first thing I need to become aware of is that there is sin itself. The first thing I need to become aware of is the concept of it. Can you see that? I need to understand that there is right and there is wrong as God defines it to be. And when I live in harmony with what is right as God decides, or you could say what is right is also what is real. When I live in harmony with what is real as God sees it, then I live in harmony with the Lord. And when I live in harmony with what is not real, with what humans think is real, then most likely I'm going to break the law. God's law, right? And we need to at least have that recognition in our hearts before we can proceed. It's like saying, I'm here in Falls Lake. This is where I'm at before I go on a trip. I am here. I do sin and I recognise there must be sin and I recognise that sin must be a thing that I'm going to have to deal with. If I don't believe that in my heart, then the last 2 days, whatever I've said, won't have any effect on you whatsoever. Right? If you don't believe that. And what I'm saying to you is from our experience, the 2,000 years of experience, sin is the biggest problem humanity on earth and in the hells of the spirit world face. That's the reason why there is so much unhappiness here and also there. Right? And that's something that we have wanted to change for such a long time, like to bring some awareness to it. And you look at, what was taught from what we taught in the first century, there's a lot of ignorance of sin in that process because this modification that happened of saying that Jesus' death is responsible for paying for your sin has basically wiped out every discussion I ever had in the first century about sin with people. Right? It's basically had the effect of everyone going, I'm not responsible for my stuff, for my creations, for my sin. Right? And when I look at that, and I've seen that happening over 2,000 years, it's distressed me a lot because it's like every person who believes that is going to be severely disappointed when they pass. And it doesn't matter, you could be a Christian for you know, two or close to 2 billion Christians on the planet who believe these things. There's 2 billion people who are going to have some pain and suffering just from that one belief, right? So that's distressing to know, but it's important to understand that the sin itself is going to be something you're going to have to address at one point or another. So don't put it off, is my suggestion. Don't put it off. In the process of going through it, you will separate what is you from what is your sin. So you'll get to know yourself better. Because you'll be able to see, oh, that thing that I do, that's not even me. That's because I'm afraid of people, or that's because I want to please people, or that's because I want to do some other sinful thing. The real me wants to do this. Right? And you'll start connecting to the real you as a process of discovering what your sin is. Because your sin is just mud thrown at you. Right? Or mud you've rolled in. One of the two, isn't it? One of it is mud that your upbringing and everybody is throwing at you, or it's what you decided through your own choice to roll in your life. That's your sin. But it can be washed off. You know, high pressure hose, and truth is the water, right? High pressure hose, like get face to face with the truth, like in your face truth, and recognise the truth. It's like a high pressure hose, squirt off all the mud. Yeah? And as you do that, you will come to recognise what you really look like. What your real nature is, what your real personality is, and so forth. You will come to see that. Right? The sin masks all of that. It's like mud over you. You can't see the clothing you're wearing. You can't see the features of your face when there's mud everywhere. And, you can't see the shape of your body even if it's caked with mud. Until that mud comes off, you won't really see yourself. Right? So, the first part of that is being aware of where I am right now. Now, part of that, as I said, is recognising that sin is a real thing. It's a creation not of God's, but of humans. But it is a real thing. It has a real effect. It's not something that's a figment of my imagination or the figment of philosophers' imagination. It is a real thing that occurs when you break the law. Right? We need to at least start there. And then from there, we need to become aware of the individual sin, of what is the sins and which ones are the most important. Now, as I said over the last 2 days, the ones that are most important are the spiritual ones. The belief systems you have that maintain your current way of life. So an example of that is, I believe love is nursing somebody. Right? Now that, if you believe that, you will nurse all the people around you thinking that that is love, but actually it'll turn out to be a sin. Or you might say, I believe love is sacrifice. I believe love is sacrifice. And if you believe that and you sacrifice for everyone around you, you'll end up sinning against yourself and God in the process. Right? And so you need to start recognising what sins are important, the spiritual ones first. The belief systems you have, they have the most powerful effect on every action you take. The beliefs you have, not the emotions or the sexual feelings you have, but the beliefs you have, the spiritual beliefs you retain. They are the ones that are the most important to examine. Right? And then comes the beliefs you have about emotions, which are really about how the soul works. And then the beliefs you have about your sexual interactions, which is really about what kinds of things are going to bring you joy in your romantic relationships. And then there's the physical things. Now, all of those areas we need to start becoming aware. Now, the first point of awareness is to go, the spiritual things are the most important. Then comes the emotional things. Then comes the sexual things. To understand the hierarchy is a part of the process of awareness. Right? So it's important to get the process of awareness going in these areas in particular. Now, we've only, over the last 2 days so far, covered up to here, haven't we? And there we only covered one thing, and there we only covered one thing, and there we only covered one thing, as examples, right? And you can see we haven't even really touched upon at this stage, like what a spiritual sin is really, what spiritual principles and laws. Now, there's been cases in this trip we've had where we have discussed it or tried to begin, we could say, a discussion with some groups, but the group gets so concerned and waylaid that in the end we can't finalise the discussion yet. So we're still thinking that sometime over the next few weeks when we go to North Carolina next, and maybe we'll get to talk about that, maybe not, we don't know.
We did talk a bit about it in England.
We did talk about it
About
in
the
England,
spiritual
about the spiritual principle.
Yeah.
And
So the two-
in the very first 2 discussions in England, so if you want to look at that. And also in Ireland we did talk about what is love really and what is humility really. We started to talk about that. But again, we didn't finish those conversations. We just didn't have enough time, and there were so many people getting worried about all sorts of things and questions and different spirit influences that occurred that it's just impossible to finish the conversation. So hopefully in either this trip or the next trip we have, we'll be able to finish some of these conversations with you. But at this stage, the main thing is to start developing the awareness that there are spiritual principles, and that those spiritual principles, love, truth, humility, faith, if you sin in those areas, they are going to be the greatest of the sins. And then when it comes to your emotions, if you suppress emotion, control emotion, shut down emotion, project emotion, use emotions of distraction such as anger and other kinds of emotions like that, as you do that, you're also shutting down your soul. And if you understand you shut down your soul, you're going to bear the consequence in your soul and in your body for doing that. There's going to be consequences that come from doing that. And the same goes sexually and physically. There'll be consequences for breaking the laws in these regards. If you can at least over the coming months start looking at your life and looking just even as like a fascinating experiment. Look at your life and go, what area would that be classified as? Like how does my belief there affect my action here? And how does my emotion there affect my action here? And how does my sexual feelings there affect my action here? And start to sort of see the correlation between the hierarchy of the sin and the effect it's having in your life, right? Then you're beginning the process of awareness, right? And a key part of it is doing it for your own sake, right? For your own sake, not for the sake of others, but for your own sake. Start there at least and go, for my own sake, I need to look at this, right? Now, if you can do that, now I'm starting to switch my mind into gear, aren't I? And even probably, as you saw yesterday and today, when we start confronting ideas, you start having feelings, don't you? It's like when we had the pet discussion, there's all these sort of fears and feelings start popping up, and that was just a physical thing. And then when we talked about the sexual thing, there's all this, but what about my relationship? And there's all these feelings that start popping up as a result of that. Can you see just the process of awareness leads you into sort of emotions that you've been avoiding over life, that you haven't been facing over life, right? And this is why the process of awareness is going to lead you eventually to awakening if you're dedicated to it. But the thing that changes you is not the awareness. The thing that changes you is the awakening. So the question then becomes, well, what is awakening compared to awareness? Right? Awakening is you get to the stage where you emotionally, inside of yourself, believe and feel that it is a sin. and that you no longer wish to commit it. And you are sorry for committing it in the past. That's awakening. Once you awaken, now you can ask God legitimately and with sincerity, ask God for forgiveness, and God will forgive you as long as you've got to that point. The law demands that you get to that point. Sarah?
Well, it's going to Sarah. We need to say that's a feeling place, don't we?
It's a feeling place,
It's
not an intellectual place.
It's a gut-wrenching, heart-turning feeling of this is
Internal
wrong.
turmoil, distress place
Yeah.
is what it is.
Yeah. Just on that note, that's what I was going to say, is like with the last few months with our God group, we've been watching a lot of the humility videos.
Yep.
And for several years, I felt through pain of what people have done to me.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, this summer, started to feel the pain I've caused others.
Correct.
And that was more painful than anything that I've ever felt.
Correct. Yep.
And do you know why, Sarah? It's because you engaged your will to harm others. And so it makes sense that there would be more pain because it's something that you wanted or that you initiated. And,
Yep.
and so that's the corrective purpose of the law, is to educate you about your will. And
Yeah.
when others have harmed you, it's painful, but that's them using their will. Yeah.
We've found historically that when we talk with people about sin, most people say, I don't sin, everybody else does. And when they look at their life, they go, the reason why I'm so unhappy is because of what everybody else did to me. And that's not actually true. God doesn't bring your soul penalties for what other people did to you. If you think about it, it'd be unfair, wouldn't it? For somebody to penalise you for what other people did to you. So God doesn't penalise you for what other people did to you.
But what about the law of attraction?
What do you mean? What about it?
Isn't the law in place to show us where we're sinning?
Certainly, but God doesn't penalise you or even bring you attractions to show you what other people did to you. It's what you're now doing.
Or the wound inside of us that hasn't yet healed.
What we're doing to
Well,
avoid the wound is really what
correct,
creates our
which is
attraction.
how you're sinning against feeling the wound. You see, if a person chose to feel the wound of their past, they would never harm another. The fact that you harm another means you've chosen to not feel the wound of the past and you've chosen to visit that wound on others. Instead, that's your sin. You see, a person can be harmed and then choose to not harm another. Right? But the majority of us, unfortunately, don't do that. What we do is we go, well, other people harm me, so I'm getting mine.
But don't you attract that harm?
Well,
where your soul is at?
let's have a scenario. I grew up with a violent dad. Okay? And then I'm going through my life and oh my gosh, we could say I'm attracting all these violent men. But is that what God is really wanting for you? God isn't wanting you to have violence with men for the rest of your life. But if I'm doing certain things to try and placate the violent men around me,
Which makes them more violent.
there's a sin in me that I need to deal with. I'm avoiding my fear, I'm avoiding my trauma, I'm avoiding my grief. And so all these violent men that are coming, I'm actually attracting them into my life because I'm pandering to them all the time.
And also, and because I'm avoiding the grief associated with my father. And it's a sin, as we've just said, to avoid your grief. So God's not punishing you for your father. He's saying, you've got problems with your dad, and by choosing to avoid it, you are sinning.
Well, I could say that exact example was that I was feeling anger towards me from men.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was attracting that. But I was actually very, very angry towards men.
Well, no, under the anger is your grief about men being angry with you.
I felt my sin of being angry towards men, though.
Well, that is your sin.
Your
Right,
sin is
yeah.
your grief that you're refusing to feel. You know, God can't make you feel your grief, The law can only say, here's your grief, here's your grief, here's your grief. And you, through the use of your will, have to get to the stage where you choose to feel it. Right? So the law of attraction is just working to say, here's your grief again, here's your grief again, here's your grief again. And every time you go angry, you go, but I don't want to feel my grief, but I don't want to feel my grief, right? That's a sin. As we just determined with the soul, with the discussion about emotion. When you shut down an emotion of grief, you're naturally going to commit a sin.
So I think I was actually feeling the pain of denying that emotion then.
Correct.
Okay.
Of the sin.
Right.
The sin is the denial.
Yeah.
Yeah? And this is the problem most of us face, is that most of us go, oh, but I brought these, attracted these things into my life, but the reality is the reason why you did is because you're avoiding dealing with it, and the law is going to say you're avoiding dealing with it, and you're sinning while you avoid dealing with it. Right? See, everything you choose to avoid dealing with, you will visit upon another. That's a fact of life. And whether you think you're visiting it upon another or not, you are. Right? It's going to happen because you avoid dealing with something. And it's going to kick off every addiction you have. The avoidance of dealing with something is going to kick off all these addictions. So it's not, the problem isn't the original thing that happened with your dad, let's say. The problem is your decision to avoid it.
That's projecting
That's projecting onto everybody else.
Naturally, yeah. And it's also shutting down your own soul, so you're even sinning against yourself. Did you understand? You're sinning against your own happiness for the future. While you retain an emotion of angst towards your own father, you're going to end up having an emotion of angst towards any man in your life, your partner, who's a man, and you're going to have an emotion of angst towards any son you have, any male child you have, and you're going to have an emotion of angst towards any man who you meet on the street, and these emotions are going to be coming out of you, and you're going to act in them, because your emotions are going to dominate what you choose to do. You're visiting your own injury upon others, and the choice to do so is a conscious decision to avoid your own problems. Therefore, it is a conscious sin. It's not a mistake. It's not, God doesn't classify that as a mistake. It's a purposeful decision to avoid your own pain and visit it upon others as a result. Right? So we need to awaken to that. And so the law of attraction, what it's doing is showing you that. Showing you, here it is again. Here is your grief. And when you get angry, it's because you don't want to feel your grief. And when you want to blame the man, that's because you didn't want to feel the grief either.
No, but when I actually felt I awakened to that sin in and of itself is when I dropped into the grief and felt the pain of my sin.
Yeah, but still feeling justified of anger towards the men, which means that you're not actually in a place of repentance about it.
Oh, I was feeling very repentant about... No.
I would have to ask your husband whether he's still getting treated the same manner. You see, it's like you're going to, when you actually deal with it with your dad, your whole actions towards every man in your life will change. Yeah. Remember I said to you the other day while we're setting up, you girls can't listen to a man. None of the girls in your God group can listen to a man. This is why there's been hardly any men in your group. Because you don't really listen to a man. You sort of just brush over what he says, right? You try to cheer him up and, I said to the girls that this venue is not really suitable for us, right? Because there's so much noise and other problems and we have more people booked and all the chairs are uncomfortable and they're trying to solve all these problems. And I go, no, first we've got to see the venue's not suitable because otherwise in the future you're going to find the same venue for me. Next time we come, I'm going to have to go and find the venue if this is how it's going to be, right? So, and I'm happy to do that, but I'm just saying, you've got to say you want to help, but you're not listening to the man's requirements because you'd rather just solve his problems than listen to his requirements, right? So that means it's not healed. You understand? Not healed. So you might think you've awakened, but it's not awakened. I'm pretty sure there's probably in your personal relationship with men, there's many times when the man's thinking, he's not listening to me, right? And this is indicative of the underlying problem, which is still the relationship not being healed. And this is the difference between aware. I think you're aware to a degree, but you weren't aware of everything I've just said, which means you're not awake. You follow me? Yeah. So you can call it awake if you want, but calling it awake when it's just aware is not helpful for your future. You can fool yourself that you're there when you need to be here. So you can say, I'm here in the awakening and I'm already gone through awareness, and you can fool yourself in that place, and it's not going to be good for you to do that, because you're going to think you've dealt with something and you've repented for something that you haven't repented for. And of course, God's love can't then come into your soul and help you with its cause if you haven't repented for it.
So what does the awakening feel like?
What does it feel like? It's a good question, isn't it? What does it feel like?
Yeah, but it's not like, oh, I felt some pain, therefore it's all done. You know, if you think about your relationship with men, it's complicated. It's not just like, oh, I've been angry at men, oh, I feel a bit bad, and that's quite painful.
What is your relationship with them sexually? What is their relationship with them emotionally? What is your feelings towards them emotionally? On some points you have condescension towards the man because you think he can't handle his emotions, and on other points you feel like he should handle that because he should make me feel secure. You've got very complicated feelings about a man emotionally. If you're awake to it all, you would know all of that. And get to the stage where you feel the remorse of being in that place.
The issue with awakening is it's uncomfortable. You could say maybe you started to awaken to some of those things. But awakening to sin is like a process that you have to be, if you're going to get to the point of repentance, you have to be willing to engage with it ongoing. Yeah.
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 And it's over when it's over.
Yeah.
Not when you
decide.
think it's over. You understand? This is one thing that a lot of people try to do. They go, oh yeah, I've dealt with that, it's all over. And they convince themselves it's all over and they've barely begun. Right? And this is a problem because you're just fooling yourself. The very worst thing you can do with sin is fool yourself about it.
I hope that someday you have the opportunity to meet some of your brothers and sisters in Australia who we've known for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have been through exactly this.
Yeah.
Where they're like, no, I dealt with it. And we're like, yeah, but let's look at these other things. And, you know, some of them, it's 10 years later, they're like, oh, I get it. I get what you were saying.
I'm just starting
you know?
now to deal with it.
Yeah.
It takes the average person on the whole probably 15 to 20 years to start awakening to most of their sins. If you're dedicated. If you're not dedicated, hundreds of years. Yeah. Yeah. If you're dedicated, you can get it done easily in your lifetime on earth. Yeah. But if you're not dedicated, it's going to be hundreds of years later, after you pass. Yeah.
It's a good process though. Like if you even think about what you started to go through, how much more self-awareness did you have? How much more you just touched it and it was better.
Better.
You know.
It always ends up better.
It's always better.
Yeah.
It's just being willing to engage with our pain, engage with truth, even if it exposes pain, and let that be something that you're dedicated to for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. When all of you ladies in the group have dealt with your true feelings towards men, you will find that there'll be an even probably number of men, and most of your husbands might even be there, going to your group. But God's truth is appeals to both men and women. It doesn't just appeal to women. It's logical, it makes sense, it's scientific in its nature, as you would expect from God, wouldn't you? You'd expect that God would be in alignment with the truths of science and so forth. And most men often don't feel that when they're listening to a group of women talk about divine truth. And there's reasons. And there's also, if there was a group of men, there's one group of men in Australia that I know that would just had a men's group, right? Why are you having a men's group? Like, why isn't it a people group? You know, And this men's group was all set up because there was all these little private discussions they wanted to have with each other about how problems facing men, but don't want to deal with the problems with women. Right? And of course, the group did nothing, made no progress, no awakening to sin. Right? So it doesn't matter what gender, it's a process you're going to have to go through to be fully awake. So don't convince yourself. One of the worst things you can do is convince yourself you're done when you're not done. Right? Convince yourself you know what you're talking about when you don't. That's the very worst thing you can do to yourself. Right? Because then you'll go off on a track thinking it's a good track. You think, oh, the road to Montreal is via Halifax from here. You know? And then I have to take a ship and go to, or a plane and go to England, and then I'll have to take a who knows what to go to cross Russia, and then I'll have to go, and eventually I go past Alaska and down, and then over Vancouver and down. Is that the road you want to take? Because if you convince yourself of a bunch of lies with regard to sin, that's the road you're going to take. You're going to take the longest route there, is what you're going to do. The very longest thing you could do. It's far better to take the most direct route, isn't it? To a location. The most direct route is by becoming aware to the point of awakening and be really honest with yourself. Truth is a direct route. Right? So you need to learn how to be honest with yourself. The very worst thing you can do is lie to yourself about it. That's the worst thing you can do. Because when you lie to yourself, you convince yourself very rapidly. All done. And the sin wants to convince you rapidly too, by the way, because its inclination is to protect itself. So it's going to say, oh, you've dealt with it? Yeah, I've dealt with it. Isn't it great? Let's move on. And you've got all this stuff, and then you go, I've prayed for years and years and years and never received any more of God's love. Why? Right? I know people who have heard about God's truth on earth recently, like in the last 30 or 40 years. They prayed every single day for God's love, and when they passed, they ended up in the hells. Right? There's many people I could relate about their life as to why they ended up there. And we've observed this from the spirit world many, many times. Right? Where they ended up in the hells thinking they'd prayed all this time and received some love. And sometimes they received it from spirits, sometimes they didn't receive it at all, sometimes they convinced themselves they received it when they received nothing. And they just lied to themselves. And then when they passed, the bare reality of all their personal lives to themselves becomes plain. Now, I don't want that to happen to you. I would prefer that you are honest with yourself and can see the truth of something. Right? This requires very honest self-examination. It requires eventually a good relationship with God. So God wants to share with you things. He wants to say, this is where things are going wrong in your life. He wants to help you. He wants you to get to a place of awakening. He wants that for you. And when you get to that place and you ask for forgiveness, the reason why God wants you to get to that place is because you'll feel like asking for forgiveness, and then His love can come and you'll be forgiven. The cause of why you did what you did will be erased. You'll feel the difference. But unless you're truthful about your sin, that's not going to happen. Right? So what I'd encourage you to do is to not involve yourself in any conviction of an alter reality. You know? And this is something the world is really focused on at the moment, isn't it? Most people in the world are living an alter reality. Like, most people in the world have no idea how bad the environment's getting. No idea how hard it's getting to produce food and clean water. No idea about how we're using energy and the destruction it's having in different areas of the planet, because they don't get to see it with their own eyes. They don't become aware. Unless you see your own sin with your own eyes, you will not become aware. and you'll not be able to awaken to it. You won't be able to be repentant for it, and God's love can't help you resolve it unless that happens. That's the biggest issue I see. There's people we've taught Divine Truth to for 15 years, and they're fundamentally the same person we met 15 years ago. And it's totally because of this problem. Unwillingness to see the sin. Right? And that's the big problem. So, let yourself begin the process. You want to ask him?
Sure.
This question was, I had an original question in mind when I first asked, and I heard Sarah's comments.
Yeah.
Because I am that token male in that group.
Yeah.
And sometimes...
Which you've only just got there, not because of the group, but because of Mary, right?
Absolutely. Mary
Exactly.
introduced. Yeah, exactly. Mary introduced.
So let's get it right. It's not the attraction of the group that caused that to happen.
Right.
It's your interaction with Mary that helped that happen.
And
Correct.
with the group.
And I go into the group quite often,
Yeah.
and I present vulnerability.
Yeah.
And but I also struggle with my worth.
Yep.
My self-worth. So that's my biggest challenge.
Yep.
And what I was going to ask you from the spiritual side, like the sin of self-worth. Right?
Yeah.
It's a
Of
big
holding on to a lack of worth.
holding on to a lack of worth, because
Yeah.
I see it in how I engage in life.
Yeah.
It's-
This is a very simple cause,
yeah.
and it's all to do with generally being treated badly as a child with regard to your worth,
Yeah.
and then feeling that you don't want to recognise how badly,
Right.
and so you just act in your worth from there on.
Yeah.
Yep. Very simple cause, but what was your question?
I think it was just more deconstructing a little bit the worth in relation to sin and the impacts.
Well,
But-
if we look at it as a spiritual concept first, so this
Yeah.
is important to understand. The spiritual concept is God created you as the pinnacle of his creation.
Yeah.
You are the pinnacle of your creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't feel that, you're sinning.
Yes. Understood. Understood.
Does
And
that make
I've been getting that very recently
Yeah,
with just some of the stuff that I've been feeling.
that's right. And the sin is going to be against yourself, obviously, so it's going to be painful
Yeah.
because it's against yourself.
Yeah.
But you are the pinnacle of God's creation, so act like it.
Right.
and also work through the emotions that cause you to not act like it. Now, those will be to do with approval, acceptance,
Yeah.
like needing other people to approve of you, needing other people to accept you, needing other people to love you. These are grief. It's grief
Yeah.
associated with those feelings that you're unwilling to feel. So instead, what you do is you present yourself with low self-worth so people can feel superior to you.
Correct. That's what happens. Yeah.
Yep. And so then when they feel superior to you, they treat you better,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But it's a fake treatment, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And what's it doing? Can you
To
see
them.
how you're engendering sin in them as well?
Correct.
You're encouraging their superiority.
Yes.
And that is, and by doing that, you're encouraging them to believe they're better than you.
Yeah.
And so you're basically saying, we're not equal.
Yeah.
And you're encouraging them to believe you're not equal to them.
Correct.
Yeah. And so that then has the ability with a monster who believes he's already not, superior, creates a heightened sense in him that he is even more superior
Yeah.
than you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously that's not a good thing because the monster becomes more of a monster
Yeah.
in that process.
And I do the same with men too.
Correct? Women and men.
Because with men, I've always found that the world is just ultra competitive.
It is.
And it's,
All competing with their daddies, right?
they're all competing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think it's kind of almost like it's, why are we competing? Like, that's one of my questions.
Yeah, crazy, really, isn't it?
But
Tired, exhausting.
Exhausting.
so then I realize that most men that I meet are in that mode.
Correct.
And so, and again, what I found is there was a Zen thing I learned years ago that was just like you got to go underneath. And to me, for some reason, I felt like that was all, and I thought that was a good thing at the time. but it's not a good thing.
No.
Or
Well, you're avoiding them attacking you at some point and belittling you, and
100%.
these are feelings you don't want to feel. But if
Yeah.
I can not go too much into your
Fair
personal
enough.
issue,
Yeah.
let's focus on the fact it's a spiritual problem first, isn't
Yes.
it? And if I understood how bad a problem it was spiritually,
Yeah.
can you see you'd be more motivated to deal with it?
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, if I understood that if I'm breaking this spiritual law of equality,
Yeah.
which is actually a part of the law of love,
Yes.
then I'm having a major impact on my life and the life of all the men around me and women around me
Yeah.
by treating them as if they are superior to me.
Yeah.
And I am, by holding on to this feeling, because I'm scared of confrontation,
Yeah.
I'm scared of ridicule, I'm scared of perhaps even abuse
Yeah.
from these people.
Yeah.
If I'm scared of that and using that as an excuse, then what I'm doing spiritually is creating a very bad problem with every person I interact with.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And I noticed that just in various ways.
Yep.
But one is sometimes it's just very hard to connect with people. A lot of times it's just very hard to connect.
Well, of course, because they are treating you as if you're inferior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, they're only going to use you for whatever they can gain more superiority for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, it's going to be hard to connect on a proper level,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's going to be heaps of results. You could say they are the effects of the sin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And this is a part of becoming aware of going, I thought that me putting myself down is a good thing for relationships.
Yeah.
Like, many people even think that's humility.
Yes. Yes.
Right? It's not humble to believe you're not the pinnacle of God's creation. That's not humble. Humble is accepting God's truth about you. Not accepting your ideas about you. Right?
Yeah.
So humble is accepting God's ideas about you.
Yeah.
Now, to be humble, I would then have to accept I am the pinnacle of God's creation every time I act like I'm not.
Yeah.
Every time I act like I'm unequal. Of course, everybody else here is the pinnacle of God's creation too, right?
Yeah.
And every time I act like I'm not equal to them, I am breaking that very big law governing love, which is to do with equality. And it's going to have some major detrimental effects in my life, right across the board. In my relationships with my partner, with my friends, with work colleagues, with my life, with what I choose to do. I'm going to feel like I need to latch on to people who are superior in order to have work and all this kind of stuff. There's all sorts of results that have come from that. And so you could say all of these physical things and emotional things happening are really the result of one big spiritual problem.
Yes.
Which is I don't treat myself as equal. And if I had dealt with the equality, if I let myself go through the emotions of why I'm scared to be equal, why I'm frightened to be equal, then all of those problems in my life would all just disappear. They were effects, right?
It's good to imagine, isn't it? If I change this one spiritual problem, what would the benefits be emotionally, sexually, and physically?
Yes.
Because given the principle that Jesus has been teaching, that spiritual change is going to positively impact everything lower in the hierarchy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's easy to see, isn't it? If you
Yeah.
think about, even just imagine it.
Yeah.
If I treated myself as equal, how would that change
Everything.
all the areas of my life?
Yeah. Emotionally, it's going to change every interaction with every person. Sexually, it's going to change your interactions with your attraction is opposite gender, right?
Yeah.
It's going to change your interactions with women.
Yeah.
You know, and because a lot of women do like men who put themselves down,
Yes.
and they feel sexually attracted to a man who puts themselves down, and then other women don't like a man who puts himself down all the time because he's exhausting
Yeah.
to deal with, and so they want a man who's superior, and so they're going to be totally
Yeah.
like uninterested, yeah, as you've experienced, right? And then there's going to be physical results, like in your life with work and interactions with other people with work and other things like you
Even
won't
your
create
body.
for yourself.
A lot of the weight you're holding
The
on
weight
to is
holding
about
on to.
this
Yeah.
as well.
Everything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 So the spiritual problem
Yeah.
is creating this sort of, remember the diagram is like
Yeah.
the seemingly
One little
small
thing.
spiritual problem,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's huge, right?
It's huge. Yeah.
From God's perspective, it's one of the core principles of life on earth is
Yeah.
equality, right? So it's huge from God's perspective, but that seemingly innocent spiritual problem, which you've been taught to believe is actually a humility,
Yeah.
right, is actually creating this huge labyrinth of creations around you, all creating your unhappiness.
And I've been seeing that on so many different levels right now.
Yep, but unwilling to change the...
Yeah.
So
You
not
have
yet
to
awakened.
say aware, but not awakened.
Awakened?
I understand.
Yeah, not aware, aware, but not awakened.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're aware, you've even come up to us and you privately and said, this is my big problem.
Yeah.
You can see it's a big problem. So you are aware,
Yeah.
but not yet awakened, because when you're awakened, you actually go through the process of repentance for that sin
Yeah.
and working through, like if you repent for the sin, God can help you with the cause, which is all to do with your fear of violence, your fear of being attacked, your fear of being ridiculed, your fear of being put down, condescension, fear of condescension. God can help you with why you have those fears,
Yeah.
and why you act in harmony
Yeah.
with those fears.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a good illustration of the problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you awaken, you will have a completely different feeling.
And
Yeah.
can we say, you know, at the moment you feel like, oh, I'm quite aware of this in many areas. In that process of awakening, you realise, holy wow.
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is everywhere. This is driving
This is
a
like
lot
my
of things.
whole life up
Yeah.
until now. How old are you now?
60.
60, yeah. So 60 years of my life driven by this one thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had the same problem to do with worthiness issues,
Yeah.
and honestly, it's taken me a long time to deal with it,
Yeah.
and to become aware to the point of awakening to deal with it even.
Yeah.
Now I am, and this is why with the groups I've become a lot more firm with the way I handle bad behaviour
Yes.
and so forth. It's all part of the process of that. No, I'm giving you my time for free. This is my space. If you don't want to be in, get lost, but you're treating me well. Right? Otherwise, that kind of thing, right?
And I won't get into it too much, but I watch in my work life and things how people use and abuse me
Yeah,
for that,
yeah.
whatever I call it.
But you
kindness,
still
but-
watch it, but you still don't change it.
But I don't change it right now.
Yeah, because you're afraid of changing it and what that might mean for your life. You think at the moment it's going to mean that, oh, you'll get attacked more, and you'll get ridiculed more, and you'll get condescended to more, and all the things you don't want.
Yeah.
But actually it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
People develop more respect for you,
Yeah.
and therefore they condescend to you less,
Yes.
not more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I thought the same.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's not like that at all. People even will have, even if they hate your guts, they'll have a grudging respect.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got some people who dislike me intensely who still donate to me.
Sure.
Isn't that weird? They respect me enough to know that my intentions are pure and my desires are pure, and they'll still donate even though they don't like me personally.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just shows you what happens when you obey the law.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Good. So hopefully from that small discussion you can see the difference between one state and the other, right? And you know, obviously we've got to talk more about it so we understand that a bit more, but sometimes the best way of understanding is to actually do it, right? And this is like, you imagine you were 2 years old and you haven't yet walked, right? And it's already a bit delayed, isn't it? If it's 2, usually that happens when you're 1 or a bit after 1 maybe. So you're 2 years old, and by this stage you're able to reason, and your mum and dad sit you down and show, they do diagrams about how to walk, and they give you all this theory about how to walk. And
Walking's going to be really
walking's
good.
going to be really good for you. And just go ahead and walk, and you know, they give you all this G up and encouragement to walk, and they do all these other things. And you decide, if you could do such a thing, you decide, no, I'm not going to do that.
Need to hear a bit more.
I need to hear a bit more. I need to understand it better. I need to understand the whole movement of it all. I need to understand how my muscles are firing. I need to understand, you know, you can go into the nitty gritty of something, can't you, so much, and still not do it,
Yeah.
right? You are better off just taking this information and just going in and doing it, at least in one area of your life. And if you recognise a big area like you have, Kevin, choose that one.
Yeah.
And go, I'm doing it on that one. Because that what I've personally found is the biggest feelings you have the biggest effects. So if you change the biggest feeling, it's going to have the biggest change to all the effects. So it's economical to deal with the worst thing first, if you can. Whatever you recognise right now as the worst thing, deal with that first.
Sure.
That makes sense? Whatever is going to be the hardest thing, deal with that first. It's going to have the largest change in your life. Most people don't do that, of course, because they're saying, oh, but I need to nurse myself through the process. It's like the child saying, but I need to maybe crawl a bit longer.
Which like my mom did.
Yes. And I need to maybe crawl, and then let's try not walking but doing it on my knees for a while. Right? Let's try that instead, you know. Now, the child doesn't do that, does it? It looks at adults walking around and says, I can do that. You know? So you need to get to the stage where you can look at a person who has some self-esteem and go, I can do that. I can do that now. I can try it now. I'm going to maybe fall over a few times so the child, you know, stands up, you know, holding onto the bed or the whatever, wobbling around a bit, right? And it's still doing it.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's a bit wobbly, who knows what's going to happen. And as a parent, you're looking at it going, like, what the hell's going to happen now? Like, and the child's going, I'm still doing it. And the parents going, ah! And the child's going, oh, I'm walking, bang, I'm walking, bang, cry, walk, get up again, walking, bang, cry, walking. It felt its emotion every time it failed. Got up again. And then it's like stairs. How many? Do you remember the first time you saw your child trying to walk down up some stairs? It's like, what's going to happen now? Like, to this child. And he's going, well, Mum and Dad, I've seen them do it, so it can be done. I'm doing it. And off he goes, right? And this is the approach we need to have with our problems. The same sort of approach. I'm going to give it a go. Yep. If I give it a go and I'm persistent, just like I was as a child when I learned how to walk, I'm going to have maybe some failures, who knows, but I'll get there in the end. Yeah?
I was going to say, like, a lot, but I have really worked on experimenting in my life, like as you would call it in the teachings. Like I would take things and I'd say, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, try it out.
And I'm going to try it. And I've done that in so many areas.
Except
this.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's the areas that are most painful that you want to not experiment.
Yeah, and I feel that I'm working on it. But
no, you're not.
All right.
No, you're not. Let's be honest, you're living in it.
Yeah.
You're living in it.
Yeah.
You're living in the reality of the unworthiness. You talk to everybody and you say, yeah, I know I'm unworthy.
Yeah.
But you still live in it.
Fair enough.
Right? So you've got to look at why you're so resistive to actually dealing with it. When you know, in your aware state, you know it's a problem.
Yeah.
You're not yet awakened to how big a problem.
Yeah.
Because you haven't seen how big a problem it is with your interactions with people.
Yeah.
You haven't seen how you're creating monsters in them by doing it as well. You haven't seen it's linked to the equality issue, the spiritual principle. You haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
You don't see it like a spiritual principle being like squashed in your life, right? You haven't seen it like that. And you need to change it. You need to see how big the spiritual principle is. But to say to yourself, I'm getting there. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed. So this is where you've got to be careful. Just don't convince yourself something's changed when it hasn't. And then look at your fears and your terrors as to why you haven't. When you know it's a problem.
Sure.
Because that's why you do it.
Yeah.
It's your fears and your terrors that you're unwilling to experience is the reason why it's happening.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And you have been unwilling to feel what they are. Because that's what hurts. Going through those.
Yeah.
You've been unwilling to feel what they are.
Yeah.
The fears that drive the behaviour.
Yeah.
You follow?
Yeah.
Now, I've had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And many of you have seen, I get attacked a lot on the media and all sorts of people all around the world. Mary and I, in our office account, it's rare to get a nice comment,
Yeah.
It's usually, one after the other of attack and abuse and whatever. We get death threats all the time. Mary gets rape threats all the time.
Yeah.
These are the kind of reasons why the average person doesn't want
Mm-hmm.
to do
Yeah.
You know, because they're going to get threatened and abused and all sorts of things will happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And at some point you've got to say, me doing the spiritually right thing
Yeah.
is worth all of that. And that is all their fault. That's not my fault.
Yeah.
That's all their problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
And if I don't feel that, then I need to feel the feeling, so I do feel that
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah.
I need to get to that point of realisation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone who is used to you feeling unworthy is going to hate it.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Yeah.
Your ex-partner, your all your business relationships,
Yeah.
everyone is going to be peed off with it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And that's why you're not doing it.
And that's the fear.
That's the fear.
Yeah.
Right? But you also don't know that if you do it, you'll attract a whole heap of people who do believe in equality.
Yes.
And you will attract good friends
Yeah.
and good people who actually do think you are just as worthy as they are, who do think they are equal to you.
Yeah.
You'll attract them too. See, at this stage, the whole belief system, the whole sin saying, there's none of those people on earth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because all I've ever experienced is
Yeah.
everyone putting me down, everyone condescending to me, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. So one thing you'll start to experience is people who actually respect you,
Yes.
people who actually care about you and who actually think that what you've got to say or the contributions you make to society are valid.
Yeah.
You'll attract all that as well. Yeah. You'll probably even have your own business eventually, rather than building up the businesses of others,
Yeah.
making them successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And not your own life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your ex-partner's not going to like it because she's used to you being.
That's why she also picked me, because she had different types of relationships with other men before, right?
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yeah, let's find, all the other men have been abusive, so let's find a man I can abuse.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's find a man I can put down at least,
Yes.
which is abuse.
Yes.
I can treat him as if he's lesser than me,
Yeah.
which is abuse.
Yeah.
Right? And I can do that and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Like that's the attraction.
Yeah.
So all these women who've treated you like you're not worth anything.
Yeah.
Like you know, if you deal with this thing, there's going to be different attractions, and at some point, this raises the issue, which is something we want to discuss with you at some future time, all of you at some future time, is how important it is to develop faith in what is right. Right? At the moment, your faith is saying, but I'm going to get hurt, but I'm going to get, attacked, I'm going to get ridiculed, I'm going to be put down. And while some of that might be true, you're going to find actually that you'll be also respected, that you'll find some kind people who actually care about you and care about your value and care about your contributions, and that will all be a part of happening as well. But see, the faith is tainted by the sin. The faith is saying, that can't be true. I have learned through my childhood that wasn't true. I've learned through my life, 60 years, it's not true. Right? So I don't believe that really.
Yeah.
And so that's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Your faith in doing the thing, and it's going to bring benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, good illustration of the point though, huh?
Very nice.
Yeah. So this is what I'd like to remind each of you, is that just because you are aware, it doesn't mean something's going to change. You're aware is like, I know I'm in Falls Lake right now. That's where I'm at. What am I going to do to get to Montreal? To the state where I'm awake and I can repent for whatever sins so that I can be forgiven and so that I can experience God's love more, right? That this is going to be a journey that you're going to have to embrace ideas and concepts and change. You're going to have to work on faith. You're going to have to work on humility. You're going to have to work on your desire to love. You're going to have to work on your desire to take action in your life rather than just talk about it and never take any action. Right? You're going to have to work on those things. You're going to have to love truth to get there. You need to know the direction you're taking. These things are important. You're going to have to do them, but the opening part of it all is becoming aware of the sin. Yeah.
And you're not going to get there overnight, are you? You're going to get to Halifax and go, it's been pretty intense so far, You're going to have to decide.
Montreal or Halifax?
Yeah, Halifax. You're not even in Montreal yet.
No, Halifax is not the way to Montreal. Gotta go through Windsor and up the way.
Okay, so we're going to get to Windsor, which is just down the road. I'm going to be like, whoa. I thought you had to go. You did.
Well, you can get there, but isn't it better to go more straight?
Just straight. Well, now we're starting to hop. The analogy is lost. The point is, it's going to be a big journey, and if you turn around halfway, you still didn't get anywhere. So.
If you stop halfway, you're not going to be there either.
Yeah.
Right, so, you know, you're done when you're done. You're there when you're there. You've got to be prepared for that thinking as well. Yeah?
This is the shortcut, Nick. This is the shortcut.
Yeah.
Nick asks, is there any shortcuts?
No, the way most of you are taking is going around the other side of the world to get to Montreal. At the moment, you know, that's the way many are taking. It's sort of like, let's deny our sin. Let's make out that it doesn't exist. Let's make out that it's not a problem. Let's make out I don't have any. Let's do all of that. And that road is the one that goes to Halifax and then, across the Atlantic to Ireland and to England and to get to Montreal. That's the road most are on. Right? It takes a long time, lots of mistakes, lots of deviations, you know, lots of disappointments where you got to think you got there and you're not even there yet. You know, you end up being like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like your kids were when you took them on a trip, right? You go, are we there yet? Are we there? I'm so tired and exhausted. Are we there yet? And the exhaustion even is a result of not confronting the sin, right? And so the direct road is straight there. The indirect road is anywhere else going there. So some of you are on the road to Brazil when you think you're on the road to Montreal. Some of you are on the road to Australia when you're on the road. You know, there's all these different roads. Remember I said there's a broad way where you can take all these different roads and you'll eventually get to the perfect natural man, but not to the celestial heavens. Right? This is one way. It's the direct route. It's the easiest route in the long run. Right? And this is what we need to come to terms with if we want to actually have joy and experience that in our lives. Anyway, it's now way over time, so we better finish now.
A yes or no? Yeah.
There's a yes or no. Mary's allowing it.
I bet you it's not a yes or no.
I just want to know, is there a finite number of sins? And if so, is there a list?
Yes and yes. 2 yeses.
Can I do a follow-up, yes or no?
Yeah. We're just going to go to 6 p.m. on yes or no.
Let's continue some of them tomorrow, shall we? And what we'd like to do with it tomorrow too probably is do a bit of spirit work as well, because there's been in the conversation, obviously there's been a lot of spirits attracted to the conversation, and we'd like to have a chat with them as well about, you know, things that they want to ask. So we'll try to integrate that tomorrow in the conversation where Mary will sort of become the medium to do that. And
also, we'd be really open to answering any questions you have about spirit relationships and spirit interactions and so on.
Yeah, and how that affects your sin.
And the principles relating to those things mainly.
Yeah. But we can continue the conversation tomorrow, and also like still think about these particular things is our goal, right? And obviously many of you will have questions about, okay, let's find out about sins, and let's find out about, you know, how many there are, and is it a finite amount? Is a good question, because if it's infinite, can you see what's the point? Can you see that? What's the point?
Then you'd have to ask, is there a loving God? Wouldn't you?
Wouldn't you? If it was infinite, then it's like, well, yeah. So no, each of you have a finite amount of sin, and to be frank, you know, how old you are, you've generally accrued a bit more. Right? So the older you get, generally you accrue a bit more. That being said, though, I've seen some very young children now with quite serious sins, so, you know, that's not always true. but it is finite. It's like a bucket. If you keep tipping, it's going to be empty soon. Yeah, but if you stop tipping, it's going to remain at the level it was. Right? So you've got to think of it that way. Just keep tipping, keep finding out, keep tipping, discovering truth, and eventually the bucket's going to be, of sin is going to be empty. And because the bucket's empty, at the moment, the bucket is like two great big horse mule buckets sitting on your shoulders, dragging down your entire life. At least if you empty them, it won't be dragging down your entire life anymore. Right, so that should help us we need to get some faith in that. Now, to be honest though, you're not going to have faith in that until you get rid of a few of them. Once you get rid of a few of them, you go, oh, what a relief getting rid of that one, You know, for Kevin with the birth issue, when you get rid of that, you're going to, like, your whole life's going to be different. And you go, what in the hell did I do that? Why did I hold on to that for 60 years? I should have dealt with this when I was 20, not 60, And of course, you didn't have the awareness when you were 20, right? But probably by the time you're 30 or 40, the developing awareness was there, but we're so anti-dealing with these things that we just hold on, hoping for a different outcome doing the same thing. Yeah. So don't do that. Don't do that anymore. So that's what I'd recommend for all of you. So hopefully you've enjoyed our discussion today. And we will see you all tomorrow at, we'll probably be here again at 10ish. So 10 o'clock or thereafter. We'll start again tomorrow at 11.
Anna?
Can I see the setup
Team?
and the meet and greet team?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and very
At the
brief, at the end. And briefly, there was a question about donations. Thank you very much for your donations. We had mentioned earlier that digital donations, that we call it, online donations are better for us. When you go to our website, you have a list of reasons why you want to donate.
It's just donate.divinetruth.com
Yep.
is the website.
Is the website, and then there's a menu. And a few people were asking, well, what should my donation be for? You can make it a general donation or assistance group donation. Either way is fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. See you tomorrow, guys.
Can you come as well?
Yeah.